topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, hello and welcome. I'm Bill Martinez, and this is the Bill Martinez Show, and we are live. Great to have you with us, sharing a part of your day. This is day 83 of the Israel-Hamas war. The question, is it becoming global? Jonathan Feldstein, president and founder of the Genesis 123 Foundation, who lives in Israel, has a son and son-in-law currently serving in the IDF, is reporting on day 83 of the Israel-Hamas war. As the death toll and injuries continue to rise, international pressure is increasing for a ceasefire. Meanwhile, Israel's prime minister has declared what it will take for a ceasefire to be enacted. Hamas must be crushed, Gaza demilitarized, and Palestinians deradicalized. Jonathan Feldstein, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us.
Bill, it's a pleasure. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Well, great to have you here to give us a balanced report on what is going on here, because here in the West, Jonathan, as you know, there's a lot of clashing worldviews where up is down and down is up, but it's clear for many of us as to what's going on. But you're there and you've got family represented in the IDF, so you can give us a clear cut and I believe a report on what's going on there.
Yeah, with pleasure. Well, actually, it's a particularly stressful moment. We had 48-hour reprieve with my son home from Gaza, and he left a couple of hours ago. And as I'm looking at the clock, he's either back in or on his way back into Gaza. It was great to have him. We hadn't had him home in a month. He's a newlywed. Next week he'll be married 6 months, and half of that marriage he's been in the army. So.
Jonathan, excuse me, just a minute. He hasn't been married a year and he's on the front. I mean, that's almost unbiblical, isn't it?
You know what? I've been doing my deep dive into that. Yeah, in Deuteronomy, there's a prohibition against sending. It's a funny thing. It's a prohibition against sending newlyweds into war, unless in case of a war. So here we are.
Yeah. Well, that almost seems like a contradiction, but yeah, I just, when you said that, I'm sorry, I stopped and I think, wait a minute, the Bible tells me that usually, in order to protect the family, I mean, you leave them alone for a year at least, but well, we know, and your son's name?
His name is Natan, Natan.
Natan. Okay. We know to pray for him and all the other IDF soldiers and those who are in harm's way, yes. Defending liberty and they've got a mission. They've got a mission to accomplish. And I think that Benjamin Netanyahu spelled it out pretty clearly, regardless of what Joe Biden or Anthony Blinken or others in the international community, the United Nations, would want to believe, right?
Yes, indeed. It's a tough order. It's not a battle that's going to end quick. And we do need the leeway to be able to have victory. This is a complete crushing of Hamas. Today we heard of the death, the announced death of more of the hostages, but we need to bring them all home, dead or alive.
Right. Exactly. And, when he talked about, I'm talking to the prime minister, when he talked about crushing Hamas, demilitarizing Gaza, and Palestinians de-radicalized, I mean, that's a big ask. I mean, I don't want to say impossible, because we know with God, all things are possible, but this has been a generational issue of the radicalization of Palestinians, in some cases, what some writers and commentators have referred to as ancient hatred. This has been going on for thousands of years. How do you de-radicalize Palestinians?
Well, it's an excellent question. To me, that's actually the hardest part of it all, because they've grown up now for generations hating us, believing that we have no biblical or historic background. Look, Palestinian Arabs who are Muslims also cut out of any biblical narrative in Genesis 22 when they believe that Abraham brought Ishmael to be sacrificed and not Isaac. So we diverge there. But my answer to this, and ultimately a long-term peaceful solution, is very radical, and it comes from especially radical coming from an Orthodox Israeli Jew. It's an article I wrote recently called "Gazans Need a Little Jesus this Christmas," and the answer is not having Egypt come in, or Saudi Arabia, or any other Arab country to rebuild. Certainly not the United States or anyone in the West, but have an army of Christians come in with medical, educational, construction, everything in Gaza that needs to be rebuilt, and give them faith. Let's convert them all to Christianity. Let them love the God of Israel. And when they love the God of Israel, they'll love the land and the people of Israel.
No, it's a good point. And the challenge you've got is even with the United Nations. I mean, you see the books that the United Nations, that are used in these schools to train up these kids. It's like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be, more objective, but yet you're promoting the worldview that got us in trouble to begin with, right?
100%. They're educational institutions. They've turned a blind eye to their institutions, all of them. UNRWA, the relief works, that's for allegedly for the refugees. All of them have been hijacked by by Hamas and other terrorists, and are being used as fronts for the terrorism. Right,
exactly. And I resist this idea of them turning a blind eye. I give them too much credit. They've done this on purpose. It's impossible. I mean, it's like, wait a minute, you're either stupid or you really, and stupid really points to some willfulness, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to be willfully stupid to do that, right?
You're right. There is a built-in hostility, which goes to the question at the beginning of the conversation about the internationalization of this. It's not new, though. The UN, the UN has proved the adage that a broken clock is still right twice a day. So once in a while, they'll get it right. They did vote in 1947 to establish a Jewish state here in the land. That doesn't mean that the UN has authority. The authority is God, not the United Nations.
Exactly.
But nevertheless, they did vote by majority. But most of the time, we see a broken clock. We see immorality. We see it governed by the still Soviet bloc that's now under auspices of Putin, Iran, China, and all of the Arab bloc, which even those who have made peace with us still vote against us.
Right. Exactly. Well, they're pressured. I mean, look at Erdogan. Erdogan in Turkey, he was like going along to get along, and all of a sudden, we got an election coming up. Waves of change. He had to yield to his constituency, and now he's anti-Israel and referring to Benjamin Netanyahu as Adolf Hitler.
That's right. He's a nut.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But see, this stuff needs to be called out and called for what it is. They're not interested. They're not interested in peace, unfortunately. And even Saudi Arabia, the prince. I take exception. I mean, when he could have stepped up and exercise some leadership and be the difference and kind of help coagulate this movement, with the Abraham Accords and peace, he could have stepped up, and he could have been an absolute hero in the Middle East. But, in my humble opinion, Jonathan, he missed his appointed time.
Well, he missed his time, and his time was hijacked also by Hamas. There's no question that part of the timing of this attack on October 7th was to undermine the closeness that was becoming between Israel and the Saudis. And what everyone was saying, it seems like ancient history that we were talking about, the inevitability of a peace accord between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And I still happen to think that probably Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman wants to see that happen, but he's playing the Arab card, which means he has to pony up to all the rest of the Arabs, even if it's dragging him back to the 14th century.
Right, exactly. And the thing is there we are. And I've been saying this repeatedly with our audience, Jonathan, is that just like what happened, on October the 7th, when, you saw, of course, this was video not taken by IDF. This is video from the cameras of the Palestinians and Hamas, where they had raped these young women, and they're dragging them naked up and down the streets in Gaza, and the Palestinians are on the sideline cheering it on. I did not see one Palestinian step up with any kind of courage and say, stop, what are you doing? Do you think this is not going to come on our own heads, what you're doing here?
Correct. Well, that's because they've grown up on drinking the Kool-Aid of hate. And for all these generations. And even if there are a few, this is also a little bit biblical. If we go to Abraham negotiating with God for saving Sodom and Gomorrah, 50 righteous people, right. 40, 10. Even if there are 10 righteous people, legitimately they're afraid to stand up. Although we are seeing more and more Palestinian Arabs in Gaza eviscerating Hamas because they realize that their lives and their society have been decimated. Exactly. And it's because of Hamas.
Right. Well, 80%, 70%, 80% of them voted Hamas into office. Correct. And here's what you got. And it should be an eye-opener to those Palestinians in the West Bank. Also a warning to those in the north where, Hezbollah is launching missiles. And I think we are near and getting closer, Jonathan, the way I'm observing this, to where there could be all-out devastation there in Lebanon.
I think you're right, and you can see on the back of the chair that I'm sitting in, there's a olive green army jacket.
I noticed that. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. So we through the Genesis 123 Foundation have been getting donations for all kinds of relief efforts here, and it's very sexy to be able to help the soldiers. So we had hundreds of these army jackets, warm army jackets, donated. And on Sunday, I rented a huge van and drove up to the Syrian border, then the Lebanese border, and we handed out hundreds of these. And what I was so interested and thrilled to see is the resolve of the soldiers who are waiting there. And they're reservists, they're away from their families.
Yes.
And they're not sitting there on bases in order to be sitting ducks or just sitting on their hands. They don't want to fight, but they know that Hezbollah especially is a major threat. And if we don't take it out, if we don't take out the threat, ultimately it's going to come back to us on their terms. And my case that I've made, and I'm actually writing an article about this, is that we need to act swiftly, preemptively, first against the Houthis, because they're a relatively easy target in Yemen, and then against Lebanon, which is going to cause us a huge amount of pain and suffering here in Israel, because even if we're successful, they have an estimated 150,000 precision missiles that can come in the window behind me and take me out if they wanted. And then we have to go to the head of the snake in Tehran.
Exactly. Well, and there's no doubt the mission potentially is extensive. And as you said, with rapidity, because meanwhile, this is a very costly war. Yes. The impact that this is having on Israel, economically, we saw a video over the holidays, Bethlehem, shuttered. I mean, the loss of income and tourism, how it died there for Bethlehem on Christmas. I mean, that there's a lot of pain and suffering there, for Israelis because of what Hamas did on October the 7th.
The economic impact is wide and felt by all of us here. If you think about it, Bill, over 300,000 reservists showed up in the days after October 7th. That represents, including those who are in active duty, we're talking about over 15% of the workforce that's now in the army. And that means we're not being productive.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, here it is. You dropped everything and came forward in these kind of numbers. But that has been the heart, that has been the training of Israelis and the IDF. You're in. I mean, you've got people even from America and in other parts of the world who heard the call and got on planes and arrived in Israel to be part of the IDF. Right.
That's 100% right. From all over the country, from all over the world, young Israelis came back, even to the point that El Al planes were flying what they called rescue flights, rescuing people from overseas so they could come back and serve in their units. And some planes took off with people sitting on the floor in the galley. It was that they were that packed, and pilots insisted on it, even though it goes against aviation regulations.
Mhm. Jonathan, as the founder of Genesis 123 Foundation, you've been able to witness the support of Israel. I mean, you're seeing both sides, the antithesis, or the antipathy towards Israel, on the world stage. And, it's like, okay, I think Israel's kind of used to it. It's disappointing because I think it's disappointing on many levels, and I think dangerous on many levels, because if you can't see what happened on October the 7th for the horror and terror that it was, then what are you doing? I mean, are you endorsing? Are you, in a sense, accepting that that's okay behavior? For the world to behave like this, this is quite dangerous. But you've been, seeing, yes, the antipathy towards Israel, but also the support. You've had a lot of people step up and as you mentioned a moment ago, getting those jackets. And when I saw the jacket, being a former Marine, I had a real quick flashback, because that was a jacket that I wore in the Marine Corps during the cold months.
All right. Well, when you come over, Bill, I'm going to save one for you, and with the Israeli insignia here on the chest. And
well, let me say this, Jonathan. That would honor me, and I believe that, and I'm grateful for the sentiment, but I would not deprive an IDF soldier of one jacket, please. If there's one extra there, and that can happen, that would.
If there were one extra, what size did it need to be?
An extra large.
You got it, my friend.
Okay, all right, but I'm just saying, I
know.
My heart. So being a former Marine, I'm about the battlefield, and I want to honor the IDF soldiers. I know when I went to Israel, and it was 5-6 years ago, it was such a blessing. And
Yes.
we were on the border. I'll share this with you. We're in the border there of Syria, and the northern part of Israel, and I'm there with a reserve major he's got his uniform on, and we're on top of this building that's been, it's been bombed out. I mean, it's just been, all but destroyed. But we're on top of the building, and he's talking to our group, and he goes, "Well, over here to the left, we got Hamas, and you got Hezbollah over here, and then we got, Palestinians that, that are after us and everything." And I'm going, "And we're on top of this building next to your uniform for what? Are we human targets here? What?"
Indeed.
Yeah, but it was eye-opening, and the heart of the IDF and all the soldiers that I had a chance to speak with was such, I got to tell you, such a blessing.
It is a blessing, and even more so now. You see resolve, you see unity, you see understanding of the mission. You see, I mean, men and women volunteering and stepping up, doing things that are nothing short of heroic.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, let's talk about, if we can, about some of these other entities that have been, pro-Israel,
Yes.
and that are supporting the cause here, Jonathan.
In terms of what, Genesis 1-2-3?
Right, exactly.
Absolutely. So what you were alluding to before, I have the privilege of seeing tremendous outpouring of support, mostly from Christians, because that's our nature. We're building bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel. And so most of our support and the lion's share of the donations are coming from Christians. So we actually we gave out hundreds of these jackets this week. I'll tell you the story in a minute, if you want, about how we met people from an artillery unit up there, and they've requested hundreds more. As a result of that, I got a matching gift for 100 jackets, and we're almost at that 100. And then a church in Kentucky stepped up and said, "We're going to fill in the gap." So we're seeing that. And when I want you to know this, and anyone who's following, it's so important, because with the integrity of doing what I do, and it's building bridges both ways. When we gave out these jackets, it was important for me to tell the soldiers that these are gifts mostly from Christians from all over the world who support it. They were overwhelmed. The language that they used. One woman said to me, a woman soldier, she said she was honored by this. Another one said how lonely he had been feeling, not on a personal basis, but on a national basis, because how much of the world has turned against us. And I didn't have a chance to explain why Christians are connected to Israel and the Jewish people now in record levels, more than probably ever in history. But he expressed this and said he didn't understand how people who aren't Israeli and aren't even Jewish would step up and care. And it warmed their hearts so much. So I'm seeing that and I'm passing it along. It's not just a jacket. We need to give them a message. It's keeping them warm physically, but a few of them articulated it also warms their heart. And I'm having the privilege through the Genesis 123 Foundation of, wow, I mean, so many different ways that we're expressing this. There's a campaign we're doing today, in fact, for widows and orphans. Over 500 soldiers have been killed since October 7th, most of them on that day in the massacre. But many of them have left behind wives and children, probably in the thousands of children already. And so we're doing something for the widows and orphans as well. And Christians care. And that's amazing.
Yeah. You know, and I think about that. And in contrast, you have, Palestinian families who are supported by UN money, by money even the United States participates in, paying, the families, pensions, because their loved one died killing an Israeli.
Yeah.
I mean, this is it's a harsh contrast, Jonathan.
Well, it's a harsh contrast, and I'm going to tell you, when you come and see if we have that extra large jacket, you're going to come here to my house, and this is a Western exposure. But on the eastern side of my apartment, I overlook an Arab village, a Palestinian Arab village. There is no barrier in between us. And before October 7th, I would say that there were hundreds of Palestinian Arabs who came to work in our town in all kinds of areas. And we supplied a third, not we, our town, but the Israeli economy supplied about a third of their economy. Now, we were talking about how the Israeli economy has been devastated. Theirs, and I say this with tremendous compassion, theirs is even more devastated. There's a young man named Mohammed who's done work for us in our home, and many of my other neighbors. He's been calling neighbors, Jewish neighbors of mine, begging for food and money for his family because he has no work now. Now, it's a strange paradox, because some of us are very compassionate and are driving to a place where we can give him food and money for his family. And others are saying, whoa, back up, Mohammed. Your people just slaughtered our people. Not happening today. And that's another challenge of what's come down as a result of October 7th massacre.
Yeah, that's a tough deal. But like you said, whether it's a jacket, whether, the Bible tells us to, if our enemy is thirsty, to give them water. And, because that's the higher calling that is there. And where we can, bless somebody, even an enemy who we think may be an enemy. And, you talk about, an Arab neighbor. And this is one thing, and I shared with our audience before, Jonathan, when I was in Israel, in understanding some of this dynamic, is that Arabs didn't have a problem, coming into areas that were controlled by Israel. They work there, as you say, in many cases, maybe a third of their income is generated in these Israeli areas. They're welcome there as long as they come in peace. Not a problem. And I spoke with a couple of Arabs, and they said, frankly, I feel safer in these areas, in these Israeli areas, than I do in the Arab areas. I thought, wow, that's interesting. Correct. And but yet, on the other hand, Israelis, there are no-go zones. You can't go into these Arab occupied areas, right?
That's correct. Area A, there are signs, big red signs telling me in English, Arabic, and Hebrew that I am not, as an Israeli citizen, I am not allowed to go into Bethlehem. I am not allowed to go into Ramallah. I'm not allowed to go into parts of Hebron and Jenin and all of and villages that are nearby. That's the apartheid.
Yes, exactly.
That's the problem here.
And it's interesting. You mentioned Bethlehem, and that was one of the heart disappointments that I had when I was in Israel. We weren't allowed to go into Bethlehem because at the time a knife intifada had just broken out.
Oh,
And
okay.
so they kept us out of the area. So I was very disappointed to not have that out. And of course, again, hard to understand unless you've been there and have gone through the Holy Land like this and witnessed it for yourself. It's hard to get your brain around, just like it's hard for me to see, Jews on the Western Wall and on the other side. I mean, here's the temple, and you're thinking, what is wrong with this? And then, as if that's not enough, then 5 times a day you're hearing the call to prayer. Yeah, but the other thing I will say about the Western Wall experience, I'll share this with you, kind of a sidebar, because this really was just so precious and special for me. Was we were there for Shabbat, and as the Jews came into the area of the Western Wall, they were coming in, arm in arm, praising God, dancing, singing. I that still is a memory that'll be forever, inscribed in my brain and my memory. It was just so precious.
Yeah, I understand that. It's a life-changing experience to come here and be able to not just see things, but experience them like you did.
Exactly. Well, I look forward to coming back, God willing, because there was just so much, so much to see, so much more. And obviously, for the affinity that I have and my faith, Israel is just, is near and dear to my heart, to say the least. Jonathan, I do want to address, why you think that we're seeing such an increase in pro-Palestinian protests around the world.
I think it's just satanic evil. It really comes down to that. Anti-Semitism is the oldest hate. It's irrational. Some people say it's jealousy of God. I don't know why anyone would be jealous, because God is accessible to all who want to have a relationship with him.
Right, exactly.
Right. It shouldn't be like that. Mm-hmm. But anti-Semitism, people talk about the growth of anti-Semitism. I don't know that we're seeing a growth of it. I think anti-Semitism's always there and always has been there. I think we're just seeing it more freely expressed because of the moral cloudiness of so much of Western society, that it's okay. It's something you were saying before. I don't remember what it was, but something you were saying, I think, in terms of the massacre of October 7th, the UN didn't denounce that. It was not the international world. Yes, heads of state came here, and to his credit, Joe Biden flew here and then left on the same day. And I don't dismiss any of that, but you didn't see world bodies denouncing it.
Exactly.
It's acceptable to be anti-Semitic. It's acceptable when Jews die and are massacred, and then to flip the narrative as blaming the victim, as somehow we are responsible for that. So I wish I had a more PhD-like answer for you, but it's just baseless, godless, inhuman hatred.
Exactly. And as I said earlier, you would only hope and pray that people could see what happens. If hatred is allowed, if it's given any room of acceptance whatsoever, it's going to come to a zip code near you. It's inescapable. And so we need to call it out, for what it is, with immediacy. Because again, I'm reminded in the book of Ecclesiastes, Jonathan, the word says, because sin is not, in a sense, Bill Martinez version, because sin is not adjudicated immediately, it grows and develops, right, and permeates and infects. It spreads out, and so this is where we are. Is that we have to acknowledge sin when it happens and reconcile it as quickly as possible. If we don't, then it spreads, and this is where we are, because we're really looking at the condition of the soul, not only of what's happening in the Middle East, but around the world.
Yes.
Where are we? I mean, we got 32 wars right now happening on the planet, And then and we're not even talking about North Korea right now with, some of the saber rattling that they're doing.
Right.
And now with their latest missile development that can hit any part of the United States of America. And they're talking 2024. I'll tell you, if there was ever a time that we needed to come to God and look to God, it's going to be in these coming years because of the clear and present danger that to me seems quite obvious.
Urgently. It seems like we're devolving into a situation globally and in the West that almost is a slippery slope that you can't climb back up from. But you're right. Ultimately, God can, but we have to take action. God doesn't want us just to sit and pray or whine about it. We have to take action. And I think everyone who follows you knows that. We're preaching to the choir. The issue is getting this out there in a way that is digestible to people who don't yet follow Bill Martinez.
Yeah. Well, even speaking to the choir, sometimes members of the choir sleep. They go to sleep on us. Okay. We got to wake them all up.
Okay.
And, because the countervailing message is out there. Just as you said earlier, Jonathan, that, somehow, the victim has been elevated to be the victor in all this situation. And everything's been turned upside down.
Correct.
Israel bad. Israel was minding their own business. They were asleep. They were having a party. They were with their family members. And they were attacked, unarmed civilians attacked, babies put in ovens. Again, to remind Jews of the Holocaust.
Yes,
we're going to go ahead and put your children. We're going to decapitate people. We're going to rape your women and drag them naked in the streets. The terror that was perpetrated on Jews, and how the international community can somehow reconcile that or come up with a different narrative that doesn't match up is just, it's incredulous.
Well, here's an important thing, what you just said. You said the terror is inflicted upon Jews. It wasn't just Jews. And that's the crazy thing. They were chopping off heads of Thai workers.
That's right.
Two Tanzanian agricultural students were killed by Hamas and sent back at home in body bags. And we, by the way, it's a great story how we participated in comforting the families. We've produced these bracelets that are available at our website that says, bring them all home.
Yes.
Right? Because we have a responsibility, not just for the Jewish hostages, but all of them. And that's a wake-up call to the world. That a friend of mine in Tanzania said, our black skin should have shown them that we're not part of this. But then we realized that by being in Israel, we are part of it. And that's, and I don't mean this as a pun, but that's the black and white of it. Is evil and there's good. And you'd have to decide today if you're on the good side, and in which case we need to fight the evil.
Well, and the thing is that some people, I think, myopically think that everything's going to be contained there in the Middle East, but we're seeing the global effects of this. Here in the United States, our FBI has reported, Jonathan, that there are something like 20 encampments, Hezbollah encampments, Hamas encampments in the United States, in the interior of the United States, and also on the other side of the border, our southern border, there are encampments there. So, I see this in a way as kind of a supply line or a chain that was similar to what Russia did at the Ukraine border. They were setting things up. And it's like, wait a minute, what were they thinking? They think that they were just going to go out there and have a weenie roast or something? Anybody that knows anything about the military could see, the chain that was being set up here. And it was obviously in order to go in and attack Ukraine. And we're having a similar situation here in America. And again, getting back to the real answer, and, time and again in world history, it would seem that God comes on the scene when he's most needed. And I say, God, please don't delay. We need
No,
you.
we need God, and it's hard to imagine us needing Him more. I hope we don't get that way.
Yeah. Well, and here it is. I mean, you look back over history. They say the reason we repeat history is because we don't learn its lessons and we forget. And here we are. Again, we're going through a cycle where we're reaping what we've sown.
Yes.
Basically, right?
Yep. Yep. And the interesting metaphor of reaping and sowing is that when you sow something, it takes a little while for it to pop up and grow, and we're not even seeing the full effect of the sowing yet.
Right, Jonathan. Let's talk a little bit and address, and this is kind of at the heart of the narrative here. I mean, we've got university presidents that couldn't address this issue. Obviously, they've been influenced by cultural influences, and I think that are outside of the United States, because it was astounding to me in listening to their response. It seems so disconnected. I mean, just even on a leadership level, that here you are, the president of university, you're there as a leader. And again, going back to what we talked earlier about, another example is that whether it's the crown prince, it could be anybody in leadership, you miss your opportunity. I mean, you're there at that appointed time. Imagine if for such a time as this, if Esther decided not to do her part, right?
You know what? That's great, Bill, because we always say for such a time as this, as a charge for us to take control and be the Esther. But what you've just shown, and no, I've never heard anyone connect the dots like this, is that these university presidents and others like them have abdicated, missed that Esther moment. And Mordecai said to Esther, if you don't do it, someone else will, but your father's house is going to die. And that's what we're seeing in the universities.
Exactly. I want you to address this perception and this narrative that's out there that Israel is, that Israel are the occupiers of the land.
Oof. Okay. Well, Israel is the rightful owner of the land, and you can't occupy a land that was deeded to occupy in any illegal way that was deeded by God, not by the United Nations. Having said that, we are operating today under the Oslo Accords with areas A, B, and C, areas A being under full Palestinian Authority control, area B shared control, and area C, like where I live, under full Israeli control. Those are the operative principles. We are not occupying their land. You could come here tonight. We could go out for a ride. I will show you scores, even at 10 o'clock at night, scores of Palestinian Arabs sharing the roads with us, going into the Israeli-owned businesses, shopping, working together. This is not anything close to apartheid. This is actually, it's been respectful coexistence. There's not an occupation. There's not a genocide. And if there's a genocide, then we're doing the suckiest job at genocide, because the Palestinian Arab population has only grown. And the same with ethnic cleansing. They are not Palestinian Arabs are not Israeli citizens. You coming here have civil rights, but you don't have state rights because you're not a citizen, nor do they. And that's applied if you and I go to any country in the world as Americans, me as an Israeli, those are the same standards. And I wish people could come and see. I brought a friend from Germany who was here a few weeks ago. She came to my home. We made a huge pot of soup. You would have loved this. And it was a cold night. We went, it was during Hanukkah, and we went out and served in this area about 100 soldiers hot, fresh, homemade soup. It was delicious. And it was great. But I took her into the grocery store near us at the end of when the pot of soup ran out to see the interaction, to see the coexistence. And she said, we never hear about this in Germany. No one could ever imagine it. So I implore people to be in touch with me. I write about this a lot. I write about it compassionately, but factually based. And I invite people to come and show them around. Maybe we should have a Bill Martinez trip where all your listeners.
Well, for nothing else, I was going to, as a sidebar here, you're speaking of soup. is that when I was in Israel, I don't know what you do with bread. I love the bread in Israel because and here in the United States, bread here I have a hard time. My body has a hard time processing bread here in America. In Israel, it was so enjoyable and of no ill effect. My body processed it; it loved it. I miss it. I miss the bread in Israel. What do you do? And is there any even what should I look for here in America to try to find a reproduction of the bread that's in Israel?
Click your heels 3 times and say, "There's no place like home."
Exactly.
And we'll get you a double extra large.
Oh, look at this! And a basket of bread. Oh my gosh! I'm telling you, it was just real precious. But no, and see, this is the narrative. These are the stories that need to be repeated, and this is what I love about this platform, Jonathan, is that it is a rare platform. It's an independent one. There are some constraints, because YouTube does carry the show. But beyond that, the other channels, because we're on like over 100 other channels that will broadcast this around the world. We're not censored, to the degree, and so sometimes we just have to be careful and sensitive to the algorithms of YouTube. But by and large, we have a level of independence where we can speak freely and tell the truth and be able to get it out there. And this is, I'm grateful to God that we have this platform.
I'm grateful to God. I'm grateful to you. But by the way, in another conversation, I'll have a conversation, not as one of the 10 bad spies, but I'll have a candid conversation about things that Israel isn't perfect in and can do better and a bigger vision, because we're not perfect. We're still human beings, even if we're meant to be a light unto the nations. We're still a work in progress on that, but we're still righteous. And
Right.
It's still, I sleep. Well, I don't sleep very well at night anymore. But it's not because of a lack of integrity of the state of Israel that's keeping me awake.
Yeah. Well, as you said, I mean, even aspirationally in our Constitution, we talked about arriving at a more perfect union.
Yeah.
Together, right? So that sentiment, that God-given sentiment and awareness of our limitations and our humanity are quite evident, but it doesn't stop us from trying. There's still, I believe, in some cases, some call it a remnant, call it what you want, but I believe that there are still those that, trust and believe in the Word of God.
Well, and the founding fathers, I'm so glad you mentioned that. They said a more perfect union. They didn't say perfect.
Yes.
They said more perfect. And that's all of our jobs, to make it more perfect.
Well, Jonathan, we've got about, looks like maybe about 8 more minutes left here in this time. What do you want our audience to take away, from, what's happening in Israel? What can we do to come alongside Genesis 1-2-3 Foundation, to co-labor with you in this effort?
Well, thank you for that. First of all, to connect with me and Genesis 1-2-3 Foundation, anyone can go to our website, genesis123.co, and on all of the social media under Genesis 1-2-3 Foundation. So please do come get the bracelets. We have a petition to free all the hostages. Like I was saying, it's not all the Jewish hostages, it's not all the Israeli hostages, but all of the hostages. We have that responsibility, and I'd love for people to come along. We're of course in the year end and always asking for donations, but I want to, you and I have spoken before, but not super intimately. I just want people to know that when they're speaking to me, my MO is not swiping a credit card. My MO is building relationships, and I love it. Today I got so many $1 donations. I love that. That just means someone cares enough to give what they can. It's a great vote. I love those donations. But what people can do is be informed. Pray for us. Prayer is free. It can be done in your pajamas, in any language, at any time of day. We need those prayers, and we Jews and Christians believe that prayer is God's currency. That's
Yes.
how he responds to us. He wants, when God says, I will bless those who bless you, he can do it himself. He doesn't, he could have erased that whole sentence from Genesis 12:3 and not even mentioned it. But he's giving us an opportunity to partner. And that's why it's called the Genesis 1, 2, 3 foundation. We're trying to create partnerships and relationships. And I'm praying that as soon as I feel like I can comfortably leave Israel, it's hard when you have a son who's in combat and a son-in-law who's in a combat unit but not in combat at the moment, and he's left my daughter and my 3 grandchildren behind. We need to be here to be responsible family members at the moment. But I'm hoping that I'll get back on the road. I was supposed to be wrapping up 2 weeks ago a book tour. We published an amazing book called Israel the Miracle. I wish I had known you then. I would have included you in it.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I will make sure that I talk to our contact, because I should have a copy of that book as well.
I'm going to get you a copy. I'm going to get you a copy.
And yeah, because otherwise we would have been able to put it up on the screen for you as well.
Next time.
If you have it handy, you can hold it up. I mean, that's okay, And so the book and how can they get it? Is available at Amazon and all the usual places.
It's I don't know if it's on Amazon yet. It was delayed getting out of Israel. We printed it here. It was delayed getting out of Israel because of the war. It's available at israelthemiracle.com. It's 75 essays by 75 Christian leaders from all over the world. Here, you'll like this. I just opened by chance to Colonel Richard Kemp's page. He's a retired colonel in the British Army, talking about an exceedingly great army here in Israel.
Wow, great.
But the pictures are stunning. The essays are inspiring. And you know what, Bill? I want to tell anyone who's listening, only for us, anyone listening goes to Genesis 1, 2, 3, israelthemiracle.com, put in the code at the checkout, Jonathan 10, and because you're my friend, they're going to save 10% when they go and get this.
Wow. Wow. That's great. Awesome. Hey, what a beautiful book.
It's stunning. And it was printed here in Israel. And I'm hoping we have about 1,500 more left in America. I'm hoping that real soon you're going to like this a lot. I'm hoping that we're going to be in the position to make another order here. And this time I'm intending to print it at Kibbutz Be'eri, which is one of the kibbutzim in the southern border that was overrun by terrorists, and it has one of Israel's largest printing presses. So we're going to invest back in that community, but when people buy more of these books.
Wow. Well, and getting back to praying, the Bible's real clear, as you say. God gave us in Genesis 12, the blessing that those who bless Israel will be blessed, those who curse will be cursed. But also in the book of Psalms, we're reminded to pray for the peace of Israel, right? And so, Jonathan, know that that we are joined with you in agreement and praying for the peace of Israel, praying for a rapid conclusion, one that is undeniably evident, because the one thing that you often hear in these conflicts, you hear this refrain, that they will know that I am God.
Yes.
And that's my prayer, is that in all this, that there would be there would be such a miracle and such a obvious display of God's hand of divine providence on this situation, that it would be conclusive. There's going to be those naysayers. I get that. But yet for people, for the billions of people around the world who have faith and believe in God, my prayer is that God would be manifest in a glorious manner, in such a way that it would be inarguable. Yes, I say those people that want to believe differently, that is their choice. Just like, when God laid before us the choice between life and death. But I always love the idea, because when you read that, God doesn't even give you a pause. It's just like, okay, what stands before you is a choice between life and death. Choose life.
Right. I like that.
I do too. It's because that's it, for us to choose life, and only God knows his timing. And as we said earlier, we often see that God is always just in time and shows up when he's most needed. And we say, God, come. Come, please. Jonathan Feldstein, thank you so much. You're such a blessing, my friend. And I look forward to continuing our conversation and keeping our audiences up to date with all that is happening there. And we look forward to even, more positive news in the days to come and this year that is coming up next.
Amen. Thank you, Bill. It's a pleasure. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you. Jonathan Feldstein, president and founder of the Genesis 123 Foundation. Our gratitude towards Jonathan and all his efforts and, raising funds to help IDF members and passing out jackets. And I pray if you're willing that you would, do so. And like you said, he's blessed because of relationship. I mean, even $1, whatever you got, whatever you can donate to the cause there. Go to the website and participate. And I thank you for doing that. Thanks to Jonathan. Thank you for your part in all this and being a part of the show as well, and for sharing with us your time. May God bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you. May be gracious unto you and give you his peace. Thanks again for being with us. Happy New Year, everybody. God bless.